It is time for Around the 412 with Smitty and Tyler.
Welcome back to another episode of Around the 412. I am Tyler. With me, as always, is my co-host Smitty. Go follow us on all of our social medias at Around the 412. If you're not watching the show over there already, go check out our YouTube channel. Hit subscribe, hit the notification bell so you never miss a video. Also, thank you to everyone that tuned in last week to our draft live shows. Big night on both nights. The first night of the draft, we hit over 3,000 concurrent viewers. Second night, I think it was over 1,600. So big night for us. I want to thank everybody that tuned in. Some people won some prizes. We had a lot of fun with some friends. So yeah, thank you to everybody. If you were able to be notified, though, if you did subscribe and hit that notification bell when we go live. So do that over on the YouTube. Also follow us wherever you listen to the podcast, like Spotify, Apple, wherever you find us. Subscribe to us, follow us, leave a 5-star review. It really helps us out a lot. But yeah, last week, the Steelers had a draft class, and we were live for that. Maybe it didn't go the way that we thought it was necessarily going to go, but overall, what do we think?
Yeah. Well, first, I want to share everything that you said in terms of people that tuned in for the live streams and stuff. Actually, between the two nights on our YouTube channel, Steelers Now YouTube channel, the Twitter account, my Twitter account, Facebook page, and Twitch, there was actually 6,000 people over the two nights that tuned in. So thank you so much for the people. We got some prizes out as well. My guy Snyder winning some Steelers tickets, DK Metcalf jersey. My guy Scott, and then a couple people winning Game Changer shirts as well. So if you want a prize, congratulations, shout out. That's the benefit of being here. So yeah, hit that notification bell. You won't miss when we do stuff like that. Yeah, I went into the day thinking, someone asked me like what percentage chance I would put on like the player, like most likely or whatever. I actually had Shador Sanders and Derek Harmon both equal 40% each. Said Kenneth Grant 10% and anybody else 10%. So like I thought relatively good chance Derek Harmon would be the pick. Obviously way off in terms of the Shador Sanders stuff. And it's always funny to me, like, and this is another thing to keep in the back of my head moving forward, is like the conversations you have with people beforehand and then afterwards, because people are a lot more willing to talk after the fact and say, yeah, really wasn't in play for us. Certainly not at that pick. Would they have considered it further down the line? I think it was probably in play, but like the value was just too good in other spots. And clearly they felt good about where they could get a quarterback on day 3. And we'll talk about that pick in a little bit, but I love the Derek Harmon selection. Finishes my 14th overall player in the class. So obviously love that value. I just love his ability to two gap. I think the hands are super violent. Love the play strength. Love the motor that he plays with. Honestly, my biggest question is, I've talked to people that are much smarter than me in terms of the trenches, but the one thing that I noticed was the missed tackle percentage, like 20% last year, which is relatively high. And, so he was disruptive, but is he going to be able to finish off plays at the next level, or is he going to be disruptive and it be other guys cleaning up the plays, which wouldn't be necessarily a bad thing either, like as long as the play's getting made. But that was my one question with his game, to be honest with you. I love the player. Think we're getting the dog if he can clean that up. I think that you're looking at a foundational type piece for that defensive line, which we certainly needed, because obviously love what Cam Hayward was still doing even as just last year. Is he going to be able to continue to play at that level? But any pieces going forward, it really felt like it was just Keanu Benton until we got Derek Harmon in here. And I would be remiss, before you obviously give your opinion on Derek Harmon, if we didn't express our deepest condolences on the loss of his mother. I mean, what was the best day of his life, and largely also was the worst. And I just can't imagine that roller coaster of emotion that you have to go through in that moment. I mean, it's such a, I don't even know how else to call it other than a beautiful tragedy. Like, you literally think about the fact that she's literally like holding on for life just to be like, so her son can tell her that he got drafted. I mean, that's unbelievable to me to just think about. Like, I get goosebumps thinking about that. So shout out to the Harmon family. I didn't have a question to begin with, what type of pro and player Derek was going to be, but now also playing for his late mother, I think that's just going to add to that tenfold. So I'm super pumped about this pick.
Yeah, I'll just start where you left off. It was just unfortunate news, and all of us knew that she was in the hospital draft night. But then to
Mhm.
learn the next day that she had tragically passed away, it's such a roller coaster of emotions for him, I'm sure. And the entire night, I'm sure the high when getting drafted was there, but you got to think that he's thinking about his mom during that entire process as the first round's rolling on. So I mean, it was probably a very interesting and very surreal situation to be in for him, but at least in some solace that he was able to get to his mom, tell her that he was drafted. Whenever I told that story to Kennedy, my wife, she started crying. She's like, "That's so
Mhm.
sad, but also so happy at the same time." Like
Yeah.
it's just a roller coaster of emotions. But yeah, thoughts are with the Harmon family. I mean, it's tragic news. But as far as the player itself goes, I'm thrilled. He is one of my favorite players in this draft class. As far as like tackles go, he is like right near the top of the cream of the crop of this draft class. I don't know where you had him specifically amongst defensive tackles. For me, he's defensive tackle
Yeah.
2. So I love that they're able to get him. Considering the other ones were drafted, I was curious to see how it was going to go because some other ones were going earlier than what was necessarily expected. So
Mhm.
seeing if the Steelers were going to have to pivot to a different position, but all week going into Thursday, my thought was that it was going to be Shedeur Sanders just because of all of the news that had happened,
Yeah.
all of the talk around the Steelers. Like I was confident in telling people, like if Shedeur is going to be there, they're going to take him. And then something shifted on draft day to where I didn't really feel that as much anymore. I still had him in my final mock draft, and I believe you did too.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah,
for
all
for the
4 of us that were
Steelers
on
in
the live
21,
show did. Mhm.
but there was something that changed in my confidence level for Shedeur Sanders going into the actual day of the draft. And to
Mhm.
see that it ended up being Derek Harmon, I'm just glad that the team went that route. It's a position of need, but also a future need. You're talking about somebody that, and I'm not trying to compare the two. Like obviously the Cam Hayward comparisons are going to be made, especially coming out of college. Very similar, like build type players, but I feel like you don't necessarily want to throw around like could be the replacement for Cam Hayward because obviously we want Cam Hayward around as long as possible, but also you don't want to necessarily just throw that expectation to be like a multi-time Pro Bowler of a type of player from Derek Harmon either. But I mean, that's really what you're looking at with this draft pick. I think is that you
Mhm.
could be having that 3 tech replacement for Cam Hayward as a defensive tackle. I think that it is a great pick for the Steelers for the future of the franchise, but also just this upcoming year it's a need, and they really. I mean, right now, looking at it, you think that they shored up their defensive line, looking at Harmon, Benton, and Hayward along that front. I'm really excited about it. I really like this pick. He's one of the guys that I really wanted to get. So yeah, I feel really good about Harmon. I don't think it could have gone any better compared to like the direction of the talk all week for the Steelers. Ending up with Derek
Mhm.
Harmon is as good as I could have hoped for.
Yeah, you mentioned this being you liking this being the direction they went. I do too. I mean, listen, I we had talked about this before, but I had become okay with the idea of Shador Sanders, assuming they weren't trading up to do it. Harmon and finding this out after talking with Alan and stuff afterwards was clearly their guy. You asked me where I had him. I had him as my DT3. But at Walter Nolan, I had as 1. I'm not baking in like character concerns, anything like that. I don't know. Like I'm not having a conversation with the dude. I'm just looking at what I think this player can be. I actually had Nolan. You're considering Mason Graham within that too?
Yeah, because I had
Okay,
both
so
of those guys ahead of Mason Graham, coincidentally
okay, so
enough.
I had Nolan, Graham, then Harmon, and then Kenneth Grant. Like all 4 a lot, but that's the way that I would have ordered them out there. Um, but I think for me, at least conversations that I've had, they had Derek Harmon as the number 1 guy on their like that was a we're not trading out scenario. That was their number 1 player at their biggest position of need, or what they viewed as their biggest position of need that they were going to address there. And the reason that I baked in the quarterback part into that conversation is I think it's important, especially at that position, to have that much conviction. Like, I can appreciate that they were just like, yeah, we're not even entertaining trade back scenarios if Derek Harmon is there because they love that player that much. Now, I would have loved to have gained an extra day 2 pick, but I can appreciate the process and them having that much conviction on a player. We had talked about this before. Like, clearly they could have traded back if they wanted to and still gotten a quarterback relatively early. But to me, that's a position where you need to have that conviction. So that's not the route that I would have wanted them to go, and I'm glad that they didn't. I think they went the best course that they could have here, despite there still being so much question. Although we can talk about, Art Rooney II's comments on draft night as well regarding Aaron Rodgers, but there's still being so much uncertainty surrounding that quarterback spot. And they also did address it in the draft, and we'll talk about that later too. But yeah, I think Derek Harmon was a home run pick in the first round. I'm curious to see how he works in, but I think, down the line, you're looking at somebody that could certainly be a game changer. What's going on, everybody? Smitty from Around the 412, and I just want to take a quick second to give a shout out to our folks at Game Changers. Their logo on the screen right now, right above my microphone. Over 2,000 different designs in their catalog. Luxury heavyweight material. I am wearing one of their shirts right now. Best vintage t-shirts in the game. Head over to gamechanger.la or pick6.la to pick up some shirts. And guess what? Use code AT412. Save yourself $10 on your order every single time. Again, gamechanger.la or pick6.la. Best vintage t-shirts in the game. Check them out. We'll see how quickly we can get. I know there's a Caleb Johnson college shirt. I might have to go snag that now that he's a member of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And
it's
the uniform
basically a
doesn't look too
Steelers
different.
shirt. If you squint your eyes, you probably couldn't tell the difference.
Let's talk about Caleb Johnson, because I think that I know when we did our mock drafts and stuff, we were landing him at 83, and I was going through the comments, and they were like, yeah, come on. Like, thought this was supposed to be realistic. What do we do and get Caleb Johnson 83? There's no way that's going to happen. He was around to pick 83 in those. He was around to pick 83 in real life. I know that he was viewed Steam specific by a lot of people in the draft community and clearly by some teams, I think, too, because you're talking about what I felt like was clearly a second-round talent. I talked about Shador being my 34th overall player. Caleb Johnson was 35th, literally right behind him in terms of a prospect. So I really like Caleb Johnson's game. I do think there is some Steam specificness to his game, but in terms of that, this is as good of a landing spot as he could have gone to. Like, what he does well, I think will really be accentuated here. The patience, the vision. People talk about the speed. The top end speed is still very good. Hit 22 miles per hour on a run last year. Like, DK Metcalf's the only player on the Steelers that's really touching that. So I think that there's, like, that's good enough. And we talked about the play speed not being a question to begin with, but I think on a down-to-down basis, maybe the short area speed is what people are talking about. I'm not sure when they think that he's not that fast. I know he hasn't displayed much in the passing game, but I think that's more of a product of the offense that he was playing within. But, man, I think that this is like as seamless and as good of a fit as we could have gotten here. Wasn't my number one back, but in terms of, like, backs that the Steelers I thought was going to be in range, he was my number one fit for the team.
Yeah, I feel like it's not coincidence that we got him twice in a mock draft, our pre-free agency, post-free agency. I feel like it just had to be at that point. I was chuckling as you were talking, because when I was thinking about it, this is the first time I've thought about this, and I don't know if anybody else has brought this up, but people criticizing Caleb Johnson as a receiving back whenever he's playing at Iowa and they don't know how to throw the football. Like, has no one even brought that up yet as a point?
Yeah.
He played at Iowa.
I guess, like, could he have a higher volume in the screen game or something like that? Maybe. I mean, I don't know. Doesn't he have didn't he have like an 80-yard receiving, like a screen touchdown that he took to the house or something like that? I mean, there's, again, I think it's such a hard.
That would account for like 40% of his receiving yards if he did.
I think it's such a hard thing to, like you're saying, translate what that passing game accomplished to the NFL. It's why, like, I mean, who have they had in terms of receivers really produce at that level? It's really like tight end. They produce really good tight ends, but even from a production standpoint, that's why a lot of people were like late to the game on Sam Laporta, because people had to go back and watch the film and see how he tested, because it's not like he had like eye-popping numbers, just a bunch of stuff after the catch.
Yeah, and honestly, when it comes to the Steelers, do you need Caleb Johnson to be that much of a receiving back? I feel like when you have Jalen Warren,
I was just bringing that up because of General Knox.
Yeah, no, and I get that, but I think his fit for the Steelers is great. And honestly, I know we've talked about it before, especially when we were mocking him at 83, and I've seen people talk about it online, kind of as just like a shot at Caleb Johnson more than anything, than an observation. The whole Najee Harris comparison. And honestly, when you like really watch his play coming out of college, and you go back and look at like former Steelers running backs coming out of college, he looks a lot more like Le'Veon Bell coming out of college than he does Najee Harris. The hesitation, the
worst thing about Najee was his vision. I mean, how many times we talked about that?
And
Caleb's
that's
probably
why
got the best vision in the class.
Absolutely. And that's why I'm comparison to Bell instead of Najee, because you look at the hesitation that Le'Veon had, you look at the vision that he was able to possess, let the plays unfold in front of him, then he makes a decision. That's similar to what Caleb Johnson does. And when you look at like the similar players as far as like build go as well, I mean, I don't feel like people forget that like Le'Veon was like a 240-pound running back coming out of college before he actually like slimmed down at the NFL level.
Yeah, people were calling him the fat back.
Yeah, so I think that would be honestly like a more similar comparison, but I think this is a great fit. It was definitely an offensive need, one of the only offensive needs that they addressed in the draft, but one that everyone expected, but just definitely didn't think that this player would be there at 83. So I think that it's great value to get for the position, and you got a 1B to your 1A, or when him and Jalen Warren, however you want to shake it up. I think this is a guy that comes in right away and contributes.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I didn't know that he'd be on the board. RJ Harvey went before him. That was a back that I thought would be on the board for us. Like, I thought it was going to be like RJ Harvey, DJ Giddens, Dylan Sampson. Like, one of those three was probably the back I thought we were looking at pick 83. But Caleb Johnson falling there, perfect for the Steelers. And then we get to day 3, and this is like, to me, the first surprise. Like, shouldn't necessarily be, because the player makes so much sense. Certainly feels like a Steeler, but not a box that I expected them to check, at least this early. Jack Sawyer of Ohio State is the pick at 124. I think that, like, this is where I expected quarterback, to be honest. Like, I thought this was going to be the Will Howard or Kyle McCord pick when we got to this point. Jack Sawyer, I think this was them just seeing the value more than anything else, a guy that very well could have gone on day 2. I didn't necessarily feel that way about him as a player. I thought this was, pretty, like, this was fine value to me. But I will say is even though I'm a Ohio State fan, I got to say, it might get some crap for this. I didn't love the pick. This is not the direction that I would have gone with the way that the board looked. Aomanor, the receiver out of Stanford, was still on the board at this point. And so was Quincy Riley. One of those two is the direction that I would have gone with this pick, because I would have liked to have seen, the big-bodied outside receiver that maybe is a little bit one-dimensional, but he can really block. And he like big plays. Like, this is perfect for Arthur Smith's passing game in terms of the type of receiver that you'd be looking for if they are going to be one-dimensional. And then obviously we talked about slot corner. Riley, I think, is plug and play there for sure. Maybe with the ability to expand into a larger role down the road. But Jack Sawyer's fine. I think it's a different body type at edge for sure. Like, you have Nick Herbig as your rotational pass rusher. That's a lighter dude that can come in and obviously just get after the passer. Has a much more expansive bag, in my opinion, than Jack Sawyer. Jack Sawyer's not going to beat you with finesse. It's not like he's got some massive repertoire or anything like that. He's going to beat you up. Like, he's going to outwill you, which I can appreciate. He's certainly good on rundowns. I think he'll be a contributor on special teams. But yeah, this was the one where I was like kind of scratching my head. I wasn't in love with the pick. It's not the direction I would go, but I can see a world where he certainly is a contributor to them. And if this means less snaps for Watt and Highsmith, and maybe less is more within those snaps, and they're not playing like 85 to 90% of the snaps, then I'm all for it.
Yeah, this one on day 3, I did not look at any of the leaks for the picks. I was trying to genuinely be surprised. It was the day that we're not doing a show. And so even when we try to not get the picks leaked during our show, the comments tend to make that happen, even if we wanted to or not. So day 3 is really the only day that I can actually like just watch the draft and not have anything spoiled for me. So whenever they announced Jack Sawyer, I was maybe shocked is a little too extreme, but like, that is not the direction that I thought they were going at all. And I think that's probably because of more so the position that they were taking, mixed with looking at what was on the board, like you mentioned. Like, I just didn't think that they would address edge that early. and considering like the wide receivers and corners that were there, like Aomanor is definitely the one that I would have taken, considering how much we've talked about the need for another outside receiver. If Pickens or DK Metcalf go down, Ben Skoranek is starting on Sunday. How much do you actually want that?
They did sign Robert Woods. So
they did sign Robert Woods, but I just meant so like at that time, right, that signing didn't happen. Yeah. So like in that moment, you were looking at Ben Skoranek going to be starting on Sunday if one of those guys goes down. So that's where I thought they were going to go, or at least eventually we're going to go. Didn't actually happen. Jack Sawyer happens. I like the player, and I understand from a scheme standpoint what they're trying to do. They looked at what the Ravens were able to do to them in the playoff. Someone asked Tomlin how soon after that Ravens game did you decide like you wanted to get better in run defense, and he said that he didn't even make it back to the locker room whenever that happened. So I understand from what Jack Sawyer can bring from a player standpoint. Like, this is a guy that you're not going to have a high ceiling on, but the floor is relatively high as well, I feel like, from what you can get out of him from definitely a run defender standpoint, not necessarily a pass rusher. He'll be, like you mentioned, he'll beat you just by outwilling you and just beating the crap out of you, but not as somebody that has a closet full of all these like pass rushing moves that's going to beat you. He's just going to out effort you. In that case. So I get why they went this route, looking at what they were trying to address from a run stopping standpoint. And he definitely does bring that. And it definitely brings a different type of body from Nick Herbig if you want to complement that, just to have somebody else in there. So I like the pick, not necessarily like a hater of it, just more surprising to me. Like I was just honestly surprised when they said his name, and not just because of the player, but just mainly just the position. I didn't think that's where they were going to go.
Yeah. Definitely was not on my radar here. I will say, I think through the mock drafts that we did, if you combine them, I think we got 3 of their selections at some point with it. And Derek Harmon wasn't even one of them, I don't think, unless we did, and that would be 4. But we took Caleb Johnson at some point. We took the guy that we're going to talk about, next 2 picks actually that we're going to talk about here. Y.A. Black is the next one, defensive lineman out of Iowa. We threw him in one late because of the pre-draft visits. And if they were going to double dip along the defensive line, he seemed like definitely one that they could go that route. I actually thought it would be the following round. I thought this was a round earlier than like I expected him to go. But I don't know in terms of like valuation around the league, how he was looked at. Alan and I had the opportunity to talk to somebody that's been covering Iowa for 24 years on the afternoon drive a couple days ago. And Tom was talking to us about YA and just feels like he can really grow into a larger role in the NFL if given the opportunity. He just kind of does all the dirty work, or at least did within that system. And we'll see if that translates to the Steelers. But like longest wingspan in Senior Bowl history, I think, or at least certainly within this, I'm pretty sure it's Senior Bowl history. But super long dude, super athletic looking, like the way that he carries his weight is pretty impressive. But yeah, I mean, to me, I'm just thinking he's going to be more of a run stopper than anything else. We'll see if he's able to move out from that traditional nose spot at all, if there's going to be any versatility there. But also when you look at like the group that they have along the defensive line, I mean, as much as we've talked about it not being a great group last year, I think that the depth is certainly there. Like there's probably going to be a tough cut or two that happens along that defensive line because of the way that they've addressed it. It's almost like the offensive line to me last year, where there's like 10 dudes and we're like, how's this going to shake out after camp? That's kind of how I'm looking at the defensive line this year. So we'll see. But they felt good enough about the YA Black selection to then let Monty Adams go. So I definitely think he's getting a helmet out the gate.
Yeah, I would think so too. And that means that you're going to, like you mentioned, have a tough cut behind you. You still have, you added in Daniel Ekwale, and you'd think that he's going to make the roster. Then you still have Isaiah Loudermilk, DeMarvin Leal, Logan Lee, Dean Lowry. I mean, there's tons of guys in that defensive line room. So you're thinking.
I would say you're maybe keeping 2 of those. Like I think it's 2 of the 4 probably.
Yeah, I was gonna say probably like 2 to 3 cuts there out of the names I just mentioned. So I think the pick is interesting. I think that as far as like drafting a most likely backup nose tackle, I think the pick's fine. And if he develops into a better player than that, then that's great for you. But I think that getting the depth on the defensive line, which is just another thing that like with Derek Harmon, Sawyer, black, they're addressing the defensive line. They know an issue.
Yeah.
And they were sticking to their guns and trying to correct that. So like I credit the Steelers for being able to look themselves in the mirror and realize what was wrong and being able to address that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to fault it. We'll see how these pan out, but I think that there's an argument to be made, like playing devil's advocate here. Is it an overcorrection the way that they've approached this? Like, I understand you got to play the Ravens twice, the teams in your division twice, but should their focus be entirely based off the results of that game? Like, because it kind of seems like that one game made them go about this way. I mean, I will say, I think that there were signs that this was happening that entire 5-game losing streak to end the season. Like, I don't think it was really just a 1-week thing, but it's just Baltimore, Derrick Henry, Lamar, like their run game is so impressive that it really was like the worst of both worlds. Not only were the Steelers defense trending in the wrong direction, Baltimore's offense was the best possible offense to expose that. So, we'll see how it all pans out, but like you said, clear focus on addressing the run game. The next pick. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say this is little information, but if you want to look at a player and think, man, this guy looks like he played on the Steelers in the 1970s, go to Y.A. Black's headshot on ESPN. I mean, the fact that he's already in the black and yellow uniform, if you just take off the Big Ten logo and replace it with the Steelers logo, I mean, I'm saying like this guy looks like he could have been on the Steel Curtain.
Yeah, isn't there like even the way that like his face doesn't even kind of have like some Derek Harmon, Cam Hayward, like it kind of looks like a mixture of both of them. So,
but he's got like a big afro too, like very 70s vibes. Yeah, I'm digging it.
All right, so we'll see how that pans out there along the defensive line. The next pick, like I said, I thought they could have taken him earlier and been justified, like 2 rounds earlier. We did this several times going through our mock drafts, thought it was the most likely quarterback selection that they were going to make. Will Howard out of the Ohio State University, with the team finally selecting a quarterback on day 3. I did not expect him to be around at this point. Thought he could go as early as round 3. Thought he'd for sure go in round 4 if he didn't. Last until round 6. I mean, to me, one of the more intriguing guys in this class, just because I think a lot of people had him as like a top 100-ish prospect, but it's all based off such a short, like small sample size. Like the college football playoff was awesome. If you can make the argument that he's going to continue to ascend in that way. And if so, the Steelers might have just gotten the best value in this entire draft class. But at the same time, if it wasn't, and he's more like the player before that stretch, then this is exactly where he should have gone, if so. But I have no problem with throwing this dart in this spot. I think at the very least, he got like a long-term backup here, which is a perfectly fine pick to spend on that. I guess my question is, okay, let's say things play out the way that we think they're going to, with Aaron Rodgers eventually signing here. Say he stays healthy the entire year and is the starting quarterback. Like, do we even end up seeing Will Howard get a shot to be the starter? Because it's not like they invested a pick in him where it's like, this guy has to get a shot. We have to see him, because they could just go right from Aaron Rodgers to next year's first-round pick.
Well, if being a Steelers fan has taught me anything, injuries happen. So I won't say it definitely couldn't happen. But if Aaron Rodgers is here and Mason Rudolph is here, I have a tough time seeing how Will Howard would get a start in year 1, especially if everything.
I would give him like every preseason rep this preseason though.
For sure. Like and that's the thing. Like I don't necessarily think that he has to play in year 1, but you would at least like to see a little bit of what you have in him. So yeah, for sure. In the preseason, give him every single rep. I have a hard time seeing, unless injuries are happening, how he's going to start in a game in 2025. But that doesn't mean like I don't want him to. Like I would like to see what Will Howard can bring to me. And maybe this is a little bit hyperbole. I think that he is the best pick of the draft for the Steelers, just based off of the value, where they got him. You're talking about someone that could have been a day 2 pick, and you're getting him in round 6. I think that anytime you get a potential top 100 player that late in the draft, that's just enormous value for the Steelers. So maybe not this necessarily the high-end best player that they got, but as far as value goes, he's to me the best pick in the draft, and someone that you could see as a potential backup for years to come for the Steelers. Like, this is a guy that we're not expecting to be a starter really down the road either. I mean, obviously we want to get what we can out of him, but nobody's expecting Will Howard to be the quarterback of the future like they did with Kenny Pickett, because he was drafted in round 6 instead of round 1. So that expectation's not there, which I think is perfect. It doesn't change the Steelers quarterback plans for the future, even just next year, when it's been really talked about and alluded to that they would really like to see if they can get a quarterback of the future. That doesn't change your plans. And if the plans go well, Will Howard could be a long-term backup for you as well. So I think that this could be a blessing for the Steelers that they were able to get him so far down in the board. And I mean, if anybody has watched Will Howard, you got to love the moxie and like the attitude that he's got as a player. He plays with a chip on his shoulder. He's talked about it a ton, about how he didn't have any of the offers out of college. He's probably going to take that same mentality going to the NFL. All the teams that passed him, including the Steelers, technically they passed on him a few rounds too. But this just talking about how the other teams didn't pick him, that the quarterback needy teams. I hope he has that same mentality. I hope he does well with the Steelers. Don't expect anything high ceiling from him. Don't expect a starter long term from him. But if he could turn into a potential backup for the next several years, I think that it's a great pick for the Steelers.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably like, I could see a world where he ends up like, say Mason Rudolph starts the season as the starter. Even without injury, I think you could possibly turn the keys over to Will Howard at some point. But if Aaron signs, I'm not so sure we see him this year. So like in terms of like variance for what we could see from Will Howard this year, I think it's massive, and it's largely dependent on how things play out with Aaron Rodgers. But, you know, you mentioned a lot of the things like non-football that there are to like about him, like a lot of the qualities that quarterbacks have to carry that aren't necessarily related, like things that he can control outside of just his talent level. And, you know, kind of playing within that, I saw Devin Jackson, who does a great job covering the NFL draft with the Philadelphia Inquirer, put out an article about him. He talked to Will Howard's mom, like right after he got drafted. And I guess Will, like as soon as Pittsburgh picked him, called Tom Arth, Steelers quarterback coach, was like, hey, can you send me like play installs? Like immediately he was like looking for information as much as he can gather about the Steelers offense already. So you got to love that. And I don't think like work ethic is ever going to be a question with him. But if you got to be able to play, like obviously the play has to match that work ethic for his career to turn into anything. I guess my point is, I don't think it will be for a lack of effort if things don't work out for Will Howard.
For sure. And obviously, yeah, you do got to play, but the benefit of taking a quarterback around 6 instead of round 1 or even higher, like we were talking about all week leading up to the draft with Shador, your expectations are not rock bottom, but like they're fairly low for what you should be expecting. So there's not going to be it's not going to be a ton of disappointment if it doesn't pan out, but if he does, then it could be a home run.
Rounding out here, 2 more picks that they had in round 7. The obligatory Steelers bloodlines pick, they got to make Carson Bruner, the linebacker out of Washington. But I mean, this is about where he was ranked, like on consensus boards. So I don't think it was necessarily a reach or anything like that. But again, it's like you look at the position and it's like, okay, who's the odd man out here? You think he's probably going to be competing with Mark Robinson or Cole Holcomb. And how many of those guys are they going to keep? So at the very most, I think 2, but more than likely just 1. So we'll see how that battle shakes out. There's obviously some money difference at play there too, depending on who they want to keep. But you know, I didn't dive into Carson Bruner a whole ton. Obviously very familiar with him. He's probably been around the Steelers for a long time. Son of Mark Bruner, the Steelers tight end. Largely underrated Steelers tight end, I feel like. You know, people only talk about Heath Miller up until recently, obviously with Pat and stuff, but like no one talks about, you know, in my opinion, Mark Bruner, who's a pretty underrated player in his own right. So, and now as the scout out in that area, and I would say, you know, a large reason why we had eyes on Troy Fautanu all season with Carson playing on that same team last year. So,
scout in the Pacific Northwest where his son plays. Bit of nepotism going on here.
I mean, yeah. But I think I don't have an issue with like the value makes sense. This is about where they had him ranked. It's just the position more than anything else. But then they addressed corner with their last pick, Dante Kent, going way off the board here. I think he was like 400 something on boards and stuff like that. I'll be 100% honest, not a player that I was familiar with. Doing a little bit of research after the pick was made. Certainly looks like a guy that can contribute in the special teams game in the return phase. But I don't are they going to be looking for that? Like, is he going to be is he going to beat out Calvin for the punt return job? Calvin was pretty good in that respect last year. Or in the kickoff game, potentially, could you have him and Kenny Gainwell if you decide you don't want Jalen doing that because he's going to be a bigger part of the offense and you decide to rid yourselves of Cordero Patterson? I think that could certainly make sense. But we'll see here. Got some inside-outside versatility. Seems like he's pretty fast. Also, boom or bust. I think I saw a graphic Alex Chisora, Steelers Depot, put up. Over the last 2 seasons, he has the most pass breakups in the FBS. He's also given them up the most second most explosive plays in the FBS. So there's a lot of boom or bust to his game.
Yeah, so I'll start with Carson Bruner. This is kind of similar to Jack Sawyer, just on a lower level for me, where I don't necessarily dislike the player, but the position is interesting considering what was still left on the board at that point. Linebacker, you would think, is a pretty full house already. Thinking that at least 1 or 2 players are going to have to be cut. So I'm curious to see how that's going to shake out. Not much more to say on that itself. Obviously hope he does well, but I just think that it's already a stacked room and you're just adding 1 more to it. Going to be an interesting decision. Dante Kent, had no idea who this dude was. 100% honest. I had to look him up, and when I looked him up, was not really impressed, and especially if you're looking at the corner position, a guy that we talked about a ton in the pre-draft process that we could be talking about. Even if the Steelers took him at 124, we would have been happy with that. Is Kobe Bryant, who went undrafted. I look at a player like that still being there, and you draft Dante Kent. I get it if they did it for the potential special teams upside, but at the same time, the points that you made are valid. Where is he really going to beat out Calvin Austin in the punt returning? And as far as kick returning, is he going to be a kick returner with Kenny Gainwell? He has never kick returned in college, only punt returned.
Right.
So that's another thing too. I don't know. If they were using him for that upside or using the pick on that, I guess sure. But to me, this is, without being rude to Dante, this is the worst pick of the draft. I don't really see the point of this pick. And I said, all respect to him. This is not taking away from him at all. I just don't see how it makes sense for what the Steelers are doing.
I will say you could swap this out with what I would consider their best UDFA player and 100% get me on board. Sebastian Castro, the safety out of Iowa, who I think can also play in the slot. I thought he could go on day 3 and no questions asked from me in terms of the value there. Definitely was better in 2023 than 2024, was dealing with an injury. Don't know how much that played into it. I know that there's some questions about the size and everything like that, but if you're not using him just as a traditional safety and depending on deployment, again, I think you could utilize him in the slot and he'd be a really good slot defender. So maybe he's more of a slot safety than he is a deep half or whatever. But I like that UDFA signing a lot. Talked with a friend of the show. Actually, we did him back on here. I think he's only been on here once. It was years ago. Nick Faribault about him, and he loves Sebastian Castro. Thought he was a 4th round player. So, yeah, I think that's largely based off the 2023 tape. But if last year, you can make an argument, just chalk up last year to injury, which I don't want to just do, obviously. But if it was, then really good value getting him as a UDFA, because I think this was a guy like Nick probably should have gone in round 4, round 5. And if it's just based off his 2023, certainly going, maybe even on the back end of day 2.
Yeah, I was looking up real quick, where on the mock draft database consensus board both of those players were, just for my own curiosity. Sebastian Castro was consensus 183. And
so
Dante
that's what, the 5th round pick?
Back end of the 5th round, yeah. And then 486 or 437 for Dante Kent. So about a 250 pick difference.
Yeah. I don't know. I like Sebastian Castro, and you talked about opportunity. I think for a UDFA, this is similar to Beanie last year, where it's you could easily see the role being carved out. I mean, the unfortunate retirement of my guy Ryan Watts. What a shame for him, but yeah, I'm curious to see what he does in the next phase of life and hope he can stay around football if he wants to in a coaching capacity or something. But like, talk about opportunity. You got Minka here, only guaranteed this year. We'll see what they do after 2025. Deshaun Elliott's a free agent. Juan Thornhill's only on a 1-year deal. And then you got nothing at safety. Like Miles Killeberg's listed as a safety, but he only plays, in goal line packages. Like Sebastian Castro's got an opportunity here as a UDFA to definitely make this roster.
For sure. I think that, like you mentioned, the opportunity's there. These players just need to go out and take it. Like, obviously, UDFA guys, it's hard to stick on a 53-man roster. So a lot of these guys just have to play out, like you mentioned, Beanie Bishop did last year. So curious to see.
I'm gonna go ahead and say my prediction is Sebastian Castro makes the 53, and neither their 7th-round picks do. They'll be on the practice squad.
That wouldn't surprise me at all. I think that makes sense. Considering that both picks, I'm like, what are the Steelers actually doing here? I don't think that they needed to make those picks with those players, but I agree with you. And as far as drafts for Omar Khan, where would you rank? And granted, there's only been 3, but where would you rank this one in terms of just like an overall draft when you compare it to the other 2?
I think there was less. I don't know if star power is the right word. Like less pop to the draft. Like it wasn't sexy.
I was thinking the word pop.
Yeah. Like I think 2023 was like the really flashy one. Also, like the number of picks is going to have to do with that as well.
True. Yeah, they didn't have a second.
I mean,
I guess throw in DK Metcalf as part of this draft class.
Oh, well then, yeah, it certainly has to pop then. But I think, I mean, that's fair to do. I mean, that's the way that they utilize the pick. Of course, it's a much more expensive 2nd-round pick than anybody else in the league that had a 2nd-round pick. But yeah, I think that's probably the best way to put it because they still checked boxes. They still, in my opinion, got better. They clearly identified what they felt their weaknesses were and had to address that. And they got really good value in my opinion, like getting a player that I had at 14, at 21, getting a player I had at 35, at 83. Will Howard, I only did a top 100. Will Howard didn't crack my top 100, probably would be right outside of that. But where they got him at, certainly great value. So I don't know. I think I would say they got really good value with 3 of their draft picks and a UDFA, maybe. I mean, one fair value, 2 reaches.
Okay, I think that's fair. You're right that obviously 2023 is the one that pops for people. But I think when you compare this one, I think the main difference is like you don't have that. I feel like star power is not necessarily the right word to use, but like maybe like just a household name in this draft class. Like Derek Harmon is probably the most household name because he's the 1st-round pick, but like you're not having a Joey Porter Jr. in this draft class. Now, granted, I don't necessarily think that you had that either. Like unless you really like offensive linemen or into the draft, an average Steeler fan is probably not going to know much about Troy Fautanu last year. So I feel like this year's draft class is probably fairly more comparable to the 2024 draft class, but I do think that they did a nice job addressing some needs. They identified what their issues were, and they stuck to their plan. So, like I said, commend them for that. Overall, I like the draft class on paper, especially including utilizing that 2nd-round pick for getting DK Metcalf. Ultimately, would we have liked them to trade back to potentially get somebody else in that 2nd round? Sure, but when you just look at getting Derek Harmon by himself, really excited about what they did.
There's some chatter about a George Pickens trade too that didn't come to fruition. I don't know. I tried to gather some information on that. I think if Dallas would have been willing to part with pick 44, they would have done it based off what I've heard. But that wasn't even on the table. Like I think we are pretty far off with what we are looking for and what the Steelers would have been able to get. It sounds like the best offers they were getting was like 4th-round picks. So they're not going to deal them for that.
Yeah, that's not worth it. I'm looking real quick to see where this guy was drafted. Oh yeah, definitely. You definitely would have gotten it. that could have got, like, I was thinking of who if you got 44, if you traded for 44 and traded George Pickens, what receiver are you taking? And I was looking to see if it would get you Kyle Williams, and it definitely did. He went in round 3.
Oh yeah. What pick was he? Was he 69?
Yeah,
Patriots?
round 3, pick 5.
Which is funny because someone did a mock trade with the Patriots for George Pickens for pick 69. What pick did Jaden Higgins go at?
Give me 1 second.
Because to me, that was Trey Harris went earlier than 44, I think.
Jaden Higgins was 34th.
Okay, so he was 34th. Trey Harris went early too. I think he went to the Chargers before we would have.
Trey Harris. Why can't I find him? He's Ole Miss, right?
Yes, he went to the Chargers.
Let's see. Second round, pick 23. So that would have been pick 50.
Oh, 55. Yeah. Okay, so he would have been on the board. That to me would have been the direction they had to go, just because of a George Pickens replacement. But either way, that didn't happen. Yeah, I don't know that I have too much to add elsewise. We'll see out of these 7 picks who makes the roster and who doesn't make the cut. Smitty from around the 412 here, and while I may not have much hair, the hair that I do have will not be cut by anybody besides Keek at Keek's Barbershop. My friend Christian Circle, been with us since day one. Keek's Barbershop, located 401 Burkitch Way, Suite 2 in Beaver, PA. Download the app The Cut, book an appointment with Christian today, or you can do walk-in with Tony or Ashley. But again, Keek's Barbershop, 401 Burkitch Way, Suite 2 in Beaver, PA. Go check them out. Old school vibe in there. Absolutely love it. Cannot recommend them enough. Wouldn't go anywhere else. Maybe I'll see you there. And also, we mentioned our live stream. Shout out to all of our sponsors that were part of that too. Game Changers, giving me a couple t-shirt codes to give away, stuff like that to a couple people. So appreciate them for doing that over there. One more sponsor to talk about right above Tyler right now, Marcello Electric. Our friend Brandon Marcello, a.k.a. Boots, his electric company, servicing Beaver, Allegheny, Lawrence, and Butler County. Experts. God, just had something stuck in my throat there as I was talking. Does commercial, residential, and service calls. To schedule service, call them at 724-614-0611. Again, 724-614-0611. But the link to his Facebook page will be down below in the description. Puts up pictures of all the work that he does there. Also, a way to contact him, whether it is phone call, email, whatever. But again, Marcello Electric, 724-614-0611. Sorry, Boots. Messed up on your ad read there a little bit. Something stuck in my throat. Drink water. Anything else to add, Tyler?
Shout out to Blank Mangelson, BYU defensive tackle that signed a free agent contract with the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Was he UDFA?
He was a UDFA. Yep.
Okay, I didn't know if he was a rookie camp invite or a UDFA.
No, so he was a rookie camp invite for the Vikings, but then got a UDFA offer from the Steelers. So he signed with the Steelers. Do I think he'll stick? No, but I'm happy that a BYU guy is showing up around Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I mean, it's an opportunity. Even if he doesn't stick here, it's an opportunity to show himself 31 other teams. So hopefully gets his foot in the door with somebody, whether it is the Steelers or somebody else, and is able to make the most of it. Where'd that other defensive lineman go? I think he was an edge rusher, though.
Talking about Tyler Batty?
Yes.
He went, is it 49ers? No, he went to the Vikings, actually. Oh.
And they got our guy, Gavin Bartholomew. We assumed this was going to be a Steeler.
I know.
Tragic. Easiest 7th round selection for us to make. I think we went around 6th there, right?
So. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Blank Bagelsson. I mean, hopefully he does good. Hopefully in camp he can look not bad. I mean, he's a big kid, 6'5", 280 pounds. So.
Okay. All right. Good stuff. All right, you guys know the drill. Be sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. If you were here on YouTube, if you're listening somewhere else, leave us a 5-star review and subscribe. But head over to the YouTube to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Don't miss a video that we post, whether it's a full episode, maybe some clips or something like that, or when we do a live stream. Those don't typically happen this time of year, probably just the episodes, but either way, you never know. And when you hit the notification bell, you'll get updated every time that we do something. You know what? Maybe we just pop in some time, do a live stream and give something away. Who knows? But hit that notification bell so you don't miss it if we do. But yeah, also leave us a 5-star review and subscribe on any of your listening platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever your podcast's from. We are there. Be sure to follow us on all of your socials at Around the 412, other than Blue Sky. Not over there, never made one. And at this point, doesn't seem like it would make sense to make one. So everywhere but there, be sure to follow us on. And that's it for Smitty, for Tyler. This has been the Around the 412 Steelers show. We'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.